In the UK, the opening of mechanics institutes were often celebrated with an opening lecture or soiree. These occasions regularly featured poetry in the speeches given at the events. Sometimes these poems were already well known to the listeners, but these could also include original verses written by a working-class institute member. Speakers were using poetry to highlight their literary achievements and demonstrate their engagement with established authors and literary canons. Importantly, they were also setting out their own literary aspirations through their membership in the Institute as a means of effecting their personal improvement. My first example also comes from the Saddleworth Mechanics Institute. In the mid-19th century, Institute members were mostly young men in their late teens. At a soiree held in July 1850, James Platt, age 19 and a woolen cloth dresser in a local mill, read his essay, Poetry and the Laws of Versification. According to the newspaper report, he also gave, quote, many illustrations from memory of different sorts of verse, which included 2 original poems of his own. One of these was reprinted, and its subject was the joys to be had in the ending of one's bachelor's status. Following his poems, the group heard from Ralph Rhodes. Rhodes was 16 and worked as a cotton piecer. He, quote, read a piece of poetry from a little book which he truly designated simple, about the death and burial of a robin redbreast. This refers to a popular English nursery rhyme. My next example comes from the Milnesbridge Mechanics Institute, West Yorkshire. Milnesbridge also had a number of woolen mills, and many of the mill workers belonged to the Institute. In 1855, its 3rd annual soiree was held. The local newspaper reported that the purpose of the Institute was, quote, the intellectual and moral improvement of the entire neighborhood. On the evening of February 19, 1855, there were about 400 attendees, mostly composed of young people. After a few speeches and several musical pieces, the audience heard 4 poems recited by Institute members. These included 3 poems written by Martin Farquhar Tupper, who was a contemporary, moralistic writer of poetry and prose, along with poems by popular writers Mrs. Hemans and Sir Walter Scott. From possible matches in the census records, we know that the Mechanics Institute members who recited these poems included, first, Christopher Eastwood, who was possibly 15 years old and whose family all worked in the mills. Second, Ben Haig, also 15, who worked as a woolen weaver. Joshua Beaumont, another 15-year-old who worked as a woolen spinner. And finally, Henry Whitley, again age 15, who was a piecer at a cloth mill, who later became a national schoolmaster. As is evident from the newspaper reports of these social events, these young members of their local mechanics institutes were reciting and writing poetry to demonstrate their past education, to assert their present status as members of an important cultural institute, and to convey their shared hopes for a brighter future through the institute's resources.